Hello, and thank you for listening to Liberty and Gun Rights Podcast. Please subscribe and follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and take the time to leave a review. Our Instagram channel is instagram.com Liberty Gun Rights. Video episodes are uploaded to rumble.com and my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel and Rumble is called James Moffett. You can just search for it. Please subscribe and follow those channels for future updates. I release episodes every Friday at 8 a.m. Thank you for listening, and now to our featured episode. Hello and welcome to Liberty and Gun Rights Podcast. My name is James Moffett, and I'll be your host. Today we have Ken Dunbar. Am I saying that correctly?
Dupar.
Dupar, okay.
Yeah, I go
So
by
we have
Kenny.
Kenny, we have Kenny online as our podcast episode. Kenny, thanks for being here. Do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
My name is Kenny Dupar, and I am a political refugee from Seattle. I saw the light, and now I live in East Tennessee, thank God. I'm retired military and construction, and I've written 2 books, and I am, as far as my firearm ownership is concerned, I've got a bad case of complacency right now. I need to sharpen up my game, James.
Okay. So, Kenny, thank you for being here, and thank you for your service. I'm very thankful for everybody that serves in the armed forces. My whole family was pretty much in the armed services. I couldn't get in because I have a club foot, and Uncle Sam said, "You're disabled." And I was like, well, okay. So that was that for that portion of my life. So I'm going to read this little blurb off of your Podmatch profile, just to have something to kind of launch off of. It says the episode could explore the balance between humor and hardship in storytelling, drawing on Kenny's unique experiences in war and cultural shifts. This conversation might highlight historical insights, female empowerment, and creative ways to discuss impactful events. So there's a lot.
Yeah, well, as far as the writing bug is concerned, I've done it to be able to figure things out, and I realized that I had a comprehensive understanding of the war in Iraq, having served there twice with the Corps of Engineers. And in between my deployments, I trained troops. So when people talk about all manner of firearms, like for a second, when they talk about assault weapons, it just makes my skin crawl, because there's no such thing as assault weapons. That's not the way we would speak in the military. But also, in my second book, I wrote a COVID love story.
Okay.
Called Pinup Dolls and Classic Cars. And so
You have a copy of the books that you can show my listening audience, or my watching audience, I should say?
I do.
For those that are watching the video, they can like see a hard copy of your book.
Yeah.
There you go. Scoundrels in Iraq. And there's the purple finger. We'll go over that in a minute.
Women got the right to vote after we kicked out.
What happens with goofballs go to war?
That's me.
That's very interesting. And where's your other one? You have your other one?
My other one.
There you go.
Is
Pinup Dolls and Classic Cars, a COVID love story. Well, that's a very unique looking book.
Yeah, have you ever been to car shows? Sometimes you'll see girls doing pinup.
Yeah.
And pure Americana. I had a whole cast of characters to write about right there. And then about 2/3 of the way in, COVID strikes. So every good story has to have a bad guy, and in my case it was COVID. But there are some gearheads and pinups that also did some pretty scoundrelly things, if I can say that. So
sure.
For me, writing is discovery. I'm going to write about what's interesting to me. Some of the big picture stuff culturally, I just find to be super important, fascinating.
Well, writing is very therapeutic, I have found. I do some writing on Medium.com and Substack, along with podcasting and photography, and I just recently retired, so now I have some more free time to do some fun things in life, which is really wonderful.
Amen to that.
So let's talk about your books. Just pick a book and let's run with it.
Okay, this is Scoundrels in Iraq. I think you would like this, James, because you said that you're an avid reader and whatnot. I appreciate when people thank me for my service and what have you. But I did some unusual things overseas. Chapter 6 is called Why I Stole a Bulldozer, and so I call myself being ethically challenged. So
why did you steal a bulldozer, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, allegedly, what happened is that there was a D9 high track in a central railroad yard in Baghdad, and nobody was using it. This was in OIF 1, so this was in the first inning of the war.
Yeah.
I look at the war in Iraq, the Gulf War being game one, and Operation Iraqi Freedom being game two, the second game of a doubleheader.
Oh.
So we got there right away, first inning, and this D9 high track, which is a beast. It was up armored. The Israeli Defense Forces call it the teddy bear. And
Yeah.
so my boss allegedly suggested that we go and pick it up.
And what's it called? The teddy bear?
Well, it's a D9 high track, so it's 54 tons. The blade is about 15 feet wide, 7 feet tall, and it can really push. So I thought about the ethical implications of what this officer was asking me to do, and I asked a stupid question, which was, well, whose is it? And he said, well, it says Caterpillar on the side of it, so it's America's. And that made sense. So, yeah, if you want to steal something, James, always do it in the hottest part of the day, because people don't care. When it's 120 degrees outside, people don't care.
Right.
So, allegedly, we got it back to our motor pool, hung about $30,000 worth of parts on it, and we gave it to the Marine Corps.
That one?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that thing's a beast. It was up armored and whatnot. And so, basically, the Marines, they had one. That's a D8, but the D9's even larger. But the thing is that what the Marines would do, they would put them side by side and enter into a compound by just knocking over the wall and running over it.
Right.
And then the smart terrorists run away. But you can collapse a building real easy with these things. Just knock out the corners and whatnot. So, why did I steal a bulldozer, allegedly? It was to save the lives of American Marines. That's the answer.
Is this better?
Yes, that's it.
There we go. Holy
Yeah.
cow, look at that thing. That's a beast.
Yeah, that's actually the picture I put in my book, too. So
And they call it a teddy bear.
the Israeli Defense Forces call it the teddy bear. But
That's
I don't know
amazing.
I don't know how it got to a railroad yard in Baghdad, but the Marines put it to good use.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did some interesting things. So if you would I can send you a copy of the book. I also have made audio books as well, which is also a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
I would love a copy of the book for sure.
But when I was doing my research and whatnot, most of the accounts, or almost all of the accounts of the war, was in the special operators, the special forces guys, the infantry officers that are talking about the combat, like the second Battle of Fallujah, stuff like that. But I'm a goofy engineer.
Right.
And so my perspective is more where the rubber meets the road. I look at things from a different perspective.
Well, I mean, you have to have engineers to run the heavy equipment and to build roads, and I'm just spitballing here because I wouldn't know, but I would imagine that you guys are very important when it comes to moving from point A to point B, right?
Yeah, we did a lot of work on the road networks. Well, actually, let me put that. We did a lot of things for the civil infrastructure.
Right.
So
Okay.
we had to do security stuff where we were building our own forward operating bases. We built bases for the Iraqi army. We built the crown jewel of my efforts there was a 9-story air traffic control tower in Tikrit. So we supported local government, building schools, just a host of things, helping their government to get back to recovering from the Ba'athist occupation and Saddam Hussein. So it's a mixed bag. I wrote the book because I was trying to figure out if we won the war or not. And it gets complicated in a hurry.
Does anybody ever win a war? Really?
Probably not.
I asked that question because there's always a declared victor, right, and a declared loser. However, there's a lot of human cost, and there's a lot of political cost.
Right.
Right. So when you add all of that up, it's like,
Yeah.
who's the actual winner?
Everybody loses
Right.
when you actually think about the people who are actually there. Usually it's those armchair warriors that want to talk about winning and losing. And some examples are very plain, unconditional surrender type of thing within American military history. But it's a mixed bag. Iraq was a mixed bag, and no one's going to lament the passing of Saddam Hussein. Not
Well,
really.
of course not. No.
Very few. But I was listening to your podcast, and I was hoping to pick your brain on a couple of things because, like I said, mine's been a profession of arms, but I've never had a real big fascination for firearms and whatnot. But this previous election, I think we dodged a bullet because there are politicians out there talking about mandatory gun buybacks,
Right.
and that just sends chills down my spine. It's like, okay, how am I gonna, you know, prepare myself, so to speak, without keeping a supposed firearm in a shoebox? I gotta get in the game, James.
Well, here's
slack.
the acceptable statement that you make when the UN peacekeeping, flatbed or cargo or personnel carriers come with the little troops with the blue helmets when they come by your house to pick up your gun. What you tell them is I lost all my guns in a fishing accident 2 years ago. They're at the bottom of the lake. Right? We don't own any guns. When they come to take our guns, we don't have any guns.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's a record of my purchase, and I was listening to one of your podcasts where they're talking about probable cause.
Yep.
I mean, if some Yahoo, a sheriff, a deputy, a judge says that there's a probable cause for you to injure yourself or others, that they can come into your house and search and
Yeah, you're talking about red flag laws, which is a very insidious, dangerous law that has been enacted in many states, and it's driven by the far left liberals, right? And so the red flag law basically states that, literally due process is thrown out the window. Anybody can go to a magistrate or go to a police station and go, hey, little Johnny was at work the other day and he was bragging about all his guns and he likes to go out and go shooting on the weekends and we think he's a nut job and he's a gun nut. And we feel like he's a danger to his family and to his neighbors, and we just want to let you know that. And so then the magistrate can enact or put out a warrant, according to the red flag law, and send the sheriff to your house at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they can seize all your guns and all your ammunition, and then the burden of proof is on you, the citizen, who is probably not even a convicted felon. You're probably a legal gun owner, and somebody has just ratted you out. If there's a red flag law in your jurisdiction, and a lot of district attorneys' offices in different states have passed the red flag law, and so they take your guns and your ammunition, and hopefully and prayerfully, the law enforcement officer and or the homeowner doesn't get shot in the middle of the morning. Because if you're a law-abiding citizen like myself, a legal gun owner, at 3 o'clock in the morning, if somebody's banging on my door, there's a good probability you're going to answer the door with a gun in your hand, right? And it may be behind the door, and they may not see it immediately, but there have been cases of home invasions where the home invaders are dressed up in BDUs and they look like SWAT officers, right? And that's how they trick you into thinking that it's law enforcement at your door. And so you open the door and let them in, and all of a sudden they're knocking you in the head and violating your wife and taking all your belongings, right? And so people, because of those kinds of incidents, people are much more wary of going to the door and just opening it at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, right? I'm going to be looking through my security cameras. Number one, I'm not going to go to the door and open it. I'm going to look through the security cameras, my door cam, and I'll be talking to them through the door cam, right? And calling 911 to verify what's going on. But yeah, the red flag laws are very, very dangerous, and people have gotten killed over that. And so,
well, don't most of the red flag laws that have been on the books, they're not even enforced. I mean, they don't even look for people who have had, mental welfare checks or kids making threats on social media. I mean, it's like a sieve. And then try getting your firearms back from the government after they've taken it from you.
Yeah, good luck. You'll spend thousands of dollars in an attorney to you're probably going to wind up having to sue the law enforcement agency that took your guns to begin with. And that's what's so unconstitutional about red flag laws is that due process is thrown out the window. There's no probable cause. Somebody's just ratted you out, and they come take your stuff. And then you have to prove your innocence. You have to prove your innocence.
When I was with my ex-wife, and I emphasize ex-wife, the weapons that I had at the time, I realized that the only person who was going to get shot was me. My self-preservation was to flee from that.
Fight or flight, huh?
Well, maybe, the people that you live with also have to be of like mind too, so that they can also, but, the thing is that you got to practice. Every day that you go to the range is a great day. I just love the smell of gunpowder, but
it's the smell of freedom, isn't it?
Yeah.
In some ways.
Well, Yeah, the smell of freedom. Have you ever heard the pup 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 of a 50 cal?
I have heard a 50 cal go off in my proximity, but not in auto fire or semi-auto. No,
Yeah,
those things are loud.
it's the sound of freedom, my
There
friend.
you go. There you go.
I remember going to an Easter service. I don't know where I was in country, but when you would leave the wire, you always had to do a test fire. And some of the infantry boys were going out doing a patrol on Easter Sunday morning, and yeah, they're doing that test fire while the chaplain is giving his message, and you hear that, bop, 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 and it's like,
Oh
oh,
my God.
this is so cool. This is
Yeah, I'll bet.
so absolutely cool. I don't know if Jesus was like, yeah, get some, but I used to hear that because there was a range not far from where I lived in the officer bachelor country, and just at night I would just hear that pop 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 pop, and it was like my mama's heartbeat. I just fall asleep right away.
There you go. Well, I think that I do know that we have veterans that listen to this podcast. Some of them are my personal friends, and I appreciate everybody's service to our country, and I'm glad that my friends made it back from whatever conflict it was that they were in. I think some of my veterans friends maybe never saw active combat. I think they were just on ships or deployed wherever. Deployed wherever doing whatever, right? I don't think everybody in the armed forces always sees, infantry style active combat or what have you. And I've never
Right.
served in the military, so correct me if I'm wrong there, but I want to say that there's a line of delineation between active military people that have served in the military and gone to conflicts and actually had to use deadly weapons to shoot the enemy versus civilians such as myself who have limited knowledge or limited experience with different types of firearms. Like you said, there's no such thing as assault weapons. We have the Armor Light sporting rifle, the AR-15 that has been demonized in the liberal media. It's an assault weapon. You've got 10 or 30 rounds of ammunition and you can kill 100 people in 15 seconds with your AR-15, and it's a single shot sporting rifle. And yes, there are, as I understand it, there are military style weapons that you can have a 3-burst round or you can have fully auto, right? But that's not what civilians carry. I don't even think SWAT officers carry fully automatic weapons. I think they have 3-round bursts. I'm spitballing here. I don't know.
Yeah, the 3 round burst was simply just to keep the thing from jamming.
Got you.
But you're right. There is almost like a warrior class in the United States, which is actually pretty big. If you take anybody who's been in the military, it's, I don't know, 10, 15 million people in our society that have some affiliation. And so you have weapons training for the most part. I don't know about the Navy. My fiance was Navy, so I don't even know if they ever took him to the range.
Navy or Air Force, right? We think about weapons training. We think about Army, Infantry, and Marine Corps, right? We don't really think of, you're not going to catch a naval pilot with an AR-15 or a machine gun in his cockpit. He'll have one strapped to the bottom of that aircraft he's in. He'll have a 50 cal on that sucker, or whatever caliber it is. It's probably not 50 cal. It may be something else. But I know they're equipped to do some massive damage, like the Warthog and aircraft like that. They're built to hunt and destroy shit.
Yeah, and that's always been one of the things that when you talk about, this is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun. Well, if you look at a firearm as being a tool, what is a tool designed for? I can understand gun control because you don't need a fully automatic weapon that's designed to kill a lot of people, infantry in the open. I don't see the reason for it, but it's so insidious how people such as yourself and whatnot that are like at the tip of the spear, pointing out the excesses. Like I was listening to that thing about your podcast about Hilton Head, where you have jurisdictions without the authority coming up with making stuff up. It's
Right.
it's a handgun with the red circle with the slash through it. Like, that's going to stop anything. It didn't stop that evil person at Sandy Hook going into a school. Why are we disarming people like that. But it seems like
Well,
be ever vigilant.
our legislators, our wonderful, all-encompassing legislators that have long since lost the concept of what the U.S. Constitution is actually for. They've lost the concept of the fact that we, the people, sent them to office to do what? To serve the people, right? To have our interests at heart, not to do fundraising for 75% of the time, but to actually read bills and understand what the bills stand for and compare the bill with the U.S. Constitution and go, is this constitutional? Is this going to serve the interests of the people? Anyway, I'm not going to get off into that. But our legislators like to pass gun control laws to appease the masses and to appease the people that are scared to death of gun nuts like us that own guns. And, I've got a gun safe behind me that's got guns and ammo. I keep it triple locked because we know that, according to them, they're liable to sneak out in the middle of the night and start killing people just willy-nilly, right? And so that's what those gun control laws are for, is to appease people that are the sheep, that are just scared to death of evil guns and evil people like us that own them,
Gun violence.
Yeah, gun violence, Arms demand action, gun violence. What's the other big national group? Gun Safety for America and whatever. There's just so many of them you just want to throw up, right? But we face that opposition when we go to public hearings in the Senate. Like in Columbia, it took us 10 years here in South Carolina to pass constitutional carry. We had to do it in steps. And every single time the Senate in Columbia had public forums for people to come speak, the president of the Sheriff's Association came and was talking about, gun violence, and only the military and active law enforcement should be the people carrying weapons. Normal citizens should have no right to carry a concealed or an open carry firearm in public, right? Because the Second Amendment doesn't really afford that, quote unquote, right? And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. So police chiefs, several police chiefs, like the police chief for Charleston, South Carolina, which is a very blue area of South Carolina. It's very liberal, very democratic. And so they show up and they talk about, no, we don't want people open carrying weapons. You must have a CWP to conceal carry. In South Carolina, politically speaking, fought for the right to even have concealed weapon permits. Right? Moons ago, before I even got here, I think in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they fought that battle. But it took us from 2015 until 2024 before we actually got a form of constitutional carry to where if you're not a felon, you're a legal gun owner, you can conceal carry your weapon or you can open carry it, and nobody can say squat about it. Right? It took after Governor McMaster signed the bill, they had a 3-month cooling off period where all the law enforcement officers in South Carolina had to have special training to train them about the bill and train them how to respond. Like it used to be, if you had a concealed carry permit and you were in Walmart and you reached up over your head to help grandma get a bag of dog food or whatever, and you exposed your weapon, well, a sheep that was afraid of that sort of thing would see it and they'd call 911 and go, there's a man with a gun in the store, there's a man with a gun. And the police would respond to that, right? And now, if there's a man with a gun, if the 911 operator gets that kind of a call, they're going to say, what is he doing with the gun? Well, he's not doing anything. Is it in his holster? Yes. Is he pointing it at anybody? No. Is he hurting anybody? No. Well, then we're not going to respond to that because it's lawful now for people to open carry or conceal carry a weapon, right? And so I just went down a rabbit hole. I don't know where I was going with that, but
I don't even know if I would carry just because of the responsibility. I'm forgetful. I would, if I could lose my cell phone, I don't know. And it's just odd. I don't know if I would do it, but is that the tip? I think you were talking about the constitutional carry. Is that ever gonna possibly happen? What's the status of that?
Well, 47 states have some form of constitutional carry. And all constitutional carry means is that you don't have to have a permit. In other words, your permit to carry your firearm, concealed or open, is Second Amendment, right? It's a God-given right that we have the ability to protect ourselves and our family, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And South Carolina is like a lot of states in that we have the Castle Doctrine. In other words, the Castle Doctrine basically says you don't have to retreat. if you're in your car at a traffic light, or if you're at home behind a locked door, or let's just say your door's open, but you're at home in your living room watching TV, and somebody decides they're going to come into your house and harm you, you can use deadly force to repel them from your house. You can use deadly force to repel them from your car. If they start whacking on your windshield or your car, the side window in your car, your driver's side window, to try to do harm to you or your family, you can use a firearm due to the castle doctrine, and you can repel them. You have the expectation of safety in your vehicle. In other words, your vehicle is just like your house. When you're a legal firearm owner and you're a legal driver of that vehicle, you got a driver's license, you got your registration, you got insurance, your car's legal, you're on the road, you're going from point A to point B, you have the expectation of safety in your vehicle according to the laws of South Carolina, right? And any county or state that has the Castle Doctrine laws in place, it's the same thing, right? And for the listening audience, no, I'm not an attorney, and this is not legal advice. Talk to an attorney, get all the specifics of that. Don't listen to what James Moffitt said on his podcast. Talk to an attorney that knows firearm laws and make sure you know what you're doing, okay? So that's kind of a disclaimer there. Anyhow, we're just talking. And
I got to check out what it is in the particulars are in Tennessee and whatnot. But I even have a little bit of an issue as far as gun rights are concerned, or the phrase God-given rights.
Okay.
I know that Thomas Jefferson wrote that, but he wasn't my favorite historical figure. But being a student of the Bible, I don't remember there being any declaration. There wasn't a declaration of rights. However, there's lots of responsibilities. And so I can make the argument that it's your responsibility to defend yourself. Who are you defending? You're defending yourself. You're defending your family, right? There's all kinds of examples like that where it would be immoral for you not to. And so there's that. I was going to say before, as far as you being able to defend yourself in Iraq, the occupation forces were like, we got to make sure that the population doesn't have artillery shells, mortar tubes, automatic weapons and whatnot. And every family had an AK-47.
Rocket launchers.
You don't need that. That we didn't want them to have. But every family had an AK-47 to protect their families. And I mean, there were, Shia and Sunni death squads roaming around. So I mean, it was the real deal. You had to protect yourself. But James, I get complacent because I'm in East Tennessee. I'm a big guy. Ain't nothing going to happen to me. Maybe I'll get one of these little Berna guns. Have you seen those? It has a plastic projectile.
Okay. Non-lethal.
A non-lethal round.
Yeah.
And
hey, you know who has great gun laws outside of America? Israel. Have you ever watched any podcasts or any TikTok videos or Facebook Live videos where you'll see women, beautiful women, they'll be at a bar and they'll have an AK-47 strapped to their back. They just walk around with them all the time. That's part of their life. They're trained from at some point, families train their sons and daughters how to shoot, be responsible gun owners, and they carry those things around with them everywhere. You don't hear, how many times have you heard of an active shooter in Israel at a shopping mall or at a hospital? You just don't hear of it. And guess what? That's because the general population is armed. They're armed to the teeth, and they don't play games. You're like, you become an active shooter. You might kill one or two people, but guess what? They're going to put you down like a rabid dog.
Yeah, the Kurds in northern Iraq, Kurdish people have been there for millennia, and they will teach their daughters to shoot.
As they should.
Yeah, they make sure that their kids know how to defend themselves because, oh, by the way, you're surrounded by Arabs and Persians and Turks and Russians and whatnot. So I think of it as a responsibility, and I've been busy with the move and all different kinds of things. But
well, and I think their culture and their war footing that their culture is used to that kind of a mentality, right? Like the Middle East. All these skirmishes and all these wars that are going on, people killing people, they have a different mindset than we have here in America, right? It's a matter of their gun rights and their gun training. It's survival training, and they they are mentally prepared for having to exercise that gun training to save their lives and to protect their families, right? Or being out in public, right? We don't have that level of necessity here in America, right? When I go out and about in my daily life, I'm not worried about some drone blowing up a school or a shopping mall or a restaurant where I'm at. I don't expect that to happen. I expect, the U.S. military and that whole complex, to protect our nation, right? But over in those other areas, those third world countries and in the Middle East or the places you're talking about, they have a different mindset and they have a different culture and a higher, it's a heightened sense of protection, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but talk about Israel and what happened on, was it October 8th or October 9th last year with the invasion from Hamas. From Gaza. It was ordinary citizens that were getting into their cars and going to the sound of gunfire, rescuing other people because their military was caught flat-footed.
Right.
But yeah, you get the sense, nothing can happen here. When you ask, what country other than ours has good gun laws, you kind of have to scratch your head because the first thing every tyrant will do is confiscate weapons. What happened in Venezuela and
Germany.
King George III didn't want colonists having, all different manner of weapons, and there would always be restrictions. I mean, that's what the king does. He doesn't want to be overthrown, and so there's just constant pushback. But I'm also worried about the government having a record of what I got, and maybe I lost them last week when I was fishing, and they're at the bottom of the lake. But there's a lot of judicial activism here, and you get that magistrate who, Kenny is a weird guy. Well, yeah, that's true.
It's not unlawful to be weird. I'd have been in prison a long time ago. If the prerequisite for being in prison was you're weird, guess what? I'd been there a long time ago.
What about the transportation of weapons? Because, not to say what we did when we moved and whatnot, but it is a pain in the butt in order to do that. Former member of law enforcement told you can transport a weapon, but there's a lot of runaround for that. But
every state has their own gun laws. Huh?
If I'm driving across country and I drive through Illinois, right?
Oops.
Am I rolling the dice in Illinois?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
If it's considered a northeastern state, brother, you better know what the gun laws are, and you better understand them very, very clearly, because you can wind up in prison. I know of law enforcement officers from not California. Oh my God, that's another story. I know law enforcement officers from South Carolina who went to visit relatives in Connecticut or New Jersey, sworn peace officers with badges and weapons, right? And driving from one state to the next, and they get pulled over by a state trooper. And, you're a cop in South Carolina? Well, that's wonderful. But here in Connecticut or in New Jersey or Manhattan or wherever you might wind up, that weapon is a felony and you're going to jail. So we're going to disarm you, put you in the back of a patrol car, and take you to the county jail, where you will sit until you get an attorney and fight your way out of jail, right? And you can literally wind up in a prison for years and lose your freedoms. Well, so that's why it's so imperative that people, if you're listening to this podcast, know what your gun laws are. If you're traveling from South Carolina to Kentucky, like there's an app you can get on your phone through USCCA, United States Concealed Carry Administration or Association, and there's an app you can put on your phone. You can say, I live here. You can highlight it on the map, and this is where I'm traveling to. Well, it'll tell you whether it's a green state or a red state. Green means that you can legally carry your firearm across that border, and if it's red, that means no, you cannot. Right? It's just like the TSA laws where there's very strict guidelines defined through the federal government, through TSA, that says this is how you can declare a firearm. It cannot be loaded. The ammo has to be separate. And when you go to your check-in counter, you don't say I've got a gun. You say I'm declaring a weapon. And it's got to be in a special case. It's got to be locked. Blah blah blah. There's a whole list of crap that you've got to abide by, or you go to jail. Right? Bottom line. So if you're listening to this podcast episode and you're traveling from one state to the next, get that smart app from USCCA. Talk to an attorney, talk to your friends, look at the state gun laws where you're traveling to make sure that you're not going to wind up in jail.
Is that concealed carry reciprocity? Does that dovetail into that?
Oh yeah. It lets you know what the state gun laws are where you're going. The USCCA map will tell you where it's safe for you to carry into if you have an existing CWP and you can legally carry the firearm in the state that you live in. But then you go to like Tennessee. If I wanted to travel to Tennessee, I would look at the USCCA map and see if I have reciprocity with Tennessee, or the state of South Carolina has reciprocity with Tennessee. Then I would want to go to the state website, to the gun law section, and read those and make sure that what I'm seeing lines up with what their state gun laws are, because they may or may not. There may be some nuances that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, depending on where you want to go to, you may want to have some personal protection.
Well, there's a bill currently in the Senate. They're trying to get national reciprocity, concealed carry reciprocity, statewide or nationwide. In other words, if the bill passes, which it won't, if the bill passes, I can travel from South Carolina to New Jersey with a firearm, right? In all those northeastern states, California, all the liberal states, all the blue states are going to fight that tooth and nail because they don't believe that citizens such as us have a right to carry a self-defense weapon of any kind. So everybody hopes that law passes, and I don't know, with President Trump being president now, that's probably the best chance we're going to have of getting that law passed. Because as soon as the Democrats take the majority of the House and the Senate, or we get another liberal president, well, that's going to be out the window. They'll put that bill out at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and set it on fire. That's how they look at it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that wrong is right and right is wrong. You see what's going on in Los Angeles, and they're saying don't cooperate with the federal authorities, and then they come back and they say, but the federal authorities aren't doing a very good job apprehending people. Well, why don't you try helping them? And then they start throwing around words insurrection. Well, if you attack a federal installation like the federal building in Los Angeles, isn't that a lot like shooting your artillery at Fort Sumter? I mean, it's a federal installation, right? I mean, what's the difference if you're the politicians saying, yeah, it's cool, you should do that, aren't you hip, there's nothing wrong with it, then aren't you promulgating, aren't you part of a conspiracy? I don't know. There's a lot of things going on in society where I think you just have to push back almost constantly, because my feeling is that the rights that we have are perishable. Right. You don't take that right like a jar of mayonnaise, don't stick it in the refrigerator. I mean, it will go bad. I think it needs a constant maintenance.
Well, let's talk about the riots and the protests in Los Angeles, right? Which are no different than any other riot or protest, Black Lives Matters, Antifa, whatever label you want to put on it, whoever's instigating it. Like, the First Amendment says we have a freedom of speech, right? And you have the freedom of speech as long as you don't incite a riot, as long as you don't cause people to be harmed, right? You can say we should go to the Capitol and burn it to the ground. And so if people go to the Capitol and they burn it to the ground, if you incited that riot, guess what? You're going to be culpable for that. You're going to be held accountable for that, which you should, right? And so there are people, okay, and I'm not a political animal, and this is going to provide a lot of humor to my listeners probably, but let's say you're in Los Angeles and you're observing ICE agents, local law enforcement, who are legally apprehending illegal immigrants who are, quote unquote, possibly guilty of breaking a crime, or committing a crime. They're felons, whatever. As a regular citizen, I don't know the backstory. I don't know whether those people are criminals or not. But if a federal law enforcement officer is and I have law enforcement background, so I'm going to put that hat on for a second. So if a federal law enforcement officer is executing a warrant or executing an order from his superiors to go hunt down these people and put them in cuffs, flexi cuffs, whatever, and haul them off to the clink, right? I, as a citizen, cannot interfere with that, because as soon as I start interfering with their actions, guess what? I'm going to wind up in jail too, right? Because I'm interfering with a federal law enforcement officer who is, quote unquote, he is engaging in lawful activity according to what he's been told, right? And so you want to protest. I have no problem with that. If you want to stand elbow to elbow with 1,000 of your Los Angeles, your California residents, whatever, you want to stand on the sidewalk and you're not interfering with what the law enforcement officers are doing, then you have a right to do that. But just as soon as you cross the line and you start throwing rocks, you start setting police cars and EV cars, electric cars on fire, and you start rioting and you start destroying personal property, guess what? You're a criminal. You're not a protester, you're a criminal. And those people need to go to jail, right? There's a difference between a peaceful protest and being a criminal.
Well, let me ask you this, James. Isn't there...
That's my opinion for whatever it's worth.
Isn't there a law that says that you cannot conceal your identity? I mean, it comes back from trying to get rid of the KKK. That's what they would do. They would terrorize people. They would conceal their identity. And I just saw on the news yesterday where you have the protesters / rioters wearing a dust mask, because you're outside and you're afraid of what? You're afraid of a virus, you're a 25-year-old guy, or are you actually concealing your identity? I haven't heard anybody talk about why are you allowed to wear, a Hamas-style head wrap type of thing.
Right.
Is that not illegal to do?
I guess it depends on the jurisdiction that you're in, what state you're in, the city you're in. Like ICE agents that are showing up to detain people are doing the same thing. Right, and maybe protesters are wearing those sort of things because they know it's going to be a violent protest. The police are going to be using tear gas and crap like that, and so they're trying to be able to breathe while they're doing whatever it is they're doing unlawfully. Right? I don't know why. I think that ICE agents are wearing because they want to conceal their personal identity so that people can't go, oh look, I know who that guy is. He lives at 123 ABC Street, and we're just going to go burn his house down. Just like we have mayors and governors who have been under attack by crazies, that go to their house and kick their door in and hold them hostage or try to burn their house down. Or there was who was the Speaker of the House? Pelosi. Pelosi was in Washington. And this nut job went to her home. Her husband was home, and he went in there with a hammer and a knife, and I forget what all the details were. But
public weird story.
Yeah, public figures come under attack all the time. Like the CEO of United Healthcare got killed. And I get that. And why the CEO of United Healthcare was walking around at 6:00 in the morning between hotels on a public street without a protection detail. Surely he knew that there were a lot of pissed off people that had family members that died because United Healthcare denied insurance coverage. And if he didn't know that, then he was an idiot, right? And it's a moot point now because he's dead. And I'm sorry he's dead. I don't think that was correct. I don't think that was right. I don't think that moron had the right to summarily execute that guy because we live in America and we have laws against that, right? For a reason. We don't live in anarchy. We're a constitutional republic and we have laws in place to keep anarchy from taking over. Does that make sense?
Hopefully, but then again, a lot of times I lived through COVID in Seattle, and so I see the way that one state or one party rule works, and it's the abuse of the government of the people. And isn't that what our founders were really afraid of? I mean, that was their experience. It was our rights, our Constitution. It's to protect the people from the government and government abuses.
From tyranny, yes.
From tyranny,
right.
But not so good at preventing the people from abusing each other. But I am very skeptical as far as having a government that will always be amenable to the needs and desires of the people themselves, because I moved to East Tennessee, praise the Lord, I've seen the light, right? But I voted with my feet, James. But just last.
And where did you come from? Seattle? Did you say you were in Seattle?
I've lived all over the country.
Oh, okay.
I've moved so many times: Los Angeles, Texas, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and doing construction. Have hammer, will travel. So I did a lot of hospitality and hotel work, remodels and whatnot, from San Francisco to West Virginia. And like I said, there are blue states out there. Well, for an example, in Seattle, there was a protest of Christian organizations, and they got confronted by these professional Antifa guys, and it was in front of City Hall. And they were claimed that they were anti-transgender, and the mayor came out and said, "We do not support these Christian organizations. They're not our kind of people." And it's like, I gotta leave. I gotta get out of this place, man. This is crazy, and it's not going to change.
Right.
And so I'm real happy to be where I am now. Like I said, I just feel like I've been complacent. I shouldn't have a firearm in a shoebox, but I'm gonna keep on trying to unravel, and see where my comfort level is. So
Well,
I gotta make sure that I'm not the one who gets shot.
I have friends that I've known for 30 years that have told me they think I'm a gun nut, right? I have a friend of mine that's in Atlanta, Georgia, and he belongs to a Mormon. He belongs to a, I don't know. I forget what the religious affiliation he has. I forget what it is right off the top of my head, but anyway, he's very very serious about his quote unquote religion, and I respect him for that, and that's fine. And he told me, we got to talking about the Second Amendment, self defense, and he and I both worked at Delta Airlines for 2 or 3 years back in 2000, 1998, 1999, and 2000, before the world was supposed to end in 2000, right? So we had a conversation about it, and I in Atlanta, Georgia, I don't think at that time I didn't conceal carry or open carry. There was no such thing as that. I didn't conceal carry, but I had several weapons. They were at my house in a safe, and I had young kids at that time, and I was very, very cognizant of the fact that I needed to keep the firearms locked up away from the children. Gun safety. Well, he found out that I had guns. What do you need a gun for? Well, self-protection, self-defense. He says, I've never owned a firearm. He says, I've been walking and driving and working and going to church for the last 35 years. Never owned a gun, never had a need for it. I've never been attacked. My family's never been attacked. I just think you're crazy. You don't need a gun. Why do you need a gun? And I'm like, well, okay, that's a valid argument. But my life is not your life. I'm not running in the circles you're running, Not that I'm going out to bad areas of town and feel a desperate need to have a 6-iron strapped to my hip, or have a fully automatic weapon with 5,000 rounds of ammo, right? Or have a 50 cal, mounted to my back of my Jeep or whatever. Because you can be stupid. You can make stupid decisions that'll wind up getting you hurt, right? There's areas of town, every state that you're in, every city you're in, there are areas that you just don't go into. There's law enforcement officers that won't go in Detroit and Los Angeles and all these different metropolitan police departments. There are areas that a regular patrol officer won't go into because it's just dangerous. You send a SWAT team in there. You don't go in there with your patrol car because you're going to be outgunned and dead if you're not careful, right? So what am I advocating here? What am I saying? What I'm saying is that maybe not every Tom, Dick, and Harry has the need to carry a firearm in public. Maybe they only need one at home for self-protection, for home defense, So everybody kind of has to make that decision on their own. My viewpoints or my philosophy on self-defense or gun ownership or gun safety or gun laws or what have you. And obviously with this podcast, I have some very pointed, passionate viewpoints about the subject, right? But I will go as far as to say that just because somebody doesn't own a gun or feel the need to own a gun for self-defense, that doesn't make them an idiot, right? It doesn't make them a liberal or a Democrat or a pacifist or whatever. Like for instance, I was in a public forum. I don't know if it was a Facebook forum or whatever it was, but we were talking, and we have Facebook groups where we talk about the Second Amendment and gun ownership and gun rights, blah blah blah, gun control, all the hot topics. And somebody popped up and said, hold the phone. I'm a Democrat. I'm a long-running Democrat. I'm a liberal, but don't paint me with a brush that says that I can't own a gun or I can't believe that I have a right to self-protection. Because while my philosophy may be Democratic, I may be part of the Democratic Party. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in the Second Amendment. It doesn't mean that I don't believe that I have a right to protect my family. And I was like, well, okay, so you're a one-off, or maybe there's 100 one-offs or 1,000 one-offs. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of liberal friends, right? So, but one of the things I learned at that point, the point that I took from that was that you can't use a brush and paint everybody in the same corner, right? You can't do that, right? And I believe that I don't care if you're white, black, yellow, purple, brown, an alien spacecraft, transgender. I don't care if you identify as a koala bear. Right? You have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have a right to self-protection, right? Just because I was raised in the 70s, I graduated high school in 1980. I know some good old boys back in Quinlan, Texas, in rural Texas, that used to hunt gays for fun, right? Hunt them down and beat them up because they were gay. That's not right. That's wrong, right? And of course, God, I'm stepping on a landmine here, but back in those days, the gays got smart and they started taking karate and jujitsu and self-defense courses. So when the rednecks came calling again, they knew how to defend themselves. And I'm like, yes, that's the American way. They should be able to defend themselves, right? Just because somebody's gay doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're the enemy, right? And like I said, I just stepped on a political landmine there. I'll quit talking.
Well, there were some lessons that we learned from COVID, and one of them, I think, was that the onerous measures that government imposed upon us. Living in Seattle, and them closing the churches was like the funnest thing they ever did.
That's insane.
Yeah, well, then they would open up the churches, and they would say, okay, finally, after 6 or 9 months, they open up the churches again, but you got to wear a mask, and you got to be It's like, we must have sound horrible. Can you imagine a congregation singing with dust masks on? It did not sound good.
Well, it probably didn't sound good anyway, but anyhow.
But one thing that we learned was that it wasn't so much whether or not these shutting down of businesses, shutting down of schools, whether or not it made any logical sense. It was about the imposition of control. And you said something where you have a friend who says, well, I don't know why you would want one. Well, that's not justification for denying me my individual rights. You know
right.
what I'm saying? There are so many laws out there that either are not enforced or are just so absolutely stupid where, again, I'll have to go back to that gun placard, that you'll see at the Walmart. I mean, what happens if you? So again, let me ask as an aside: can individual businesses decide whether or not they will allow weapons on their premises?
In South Carolina, private businesses can put a legal SLED-regulated gun sign, prohibitive gun sign, whatever you want to call it. It has to be certain inches wide, certain inches deep. It's got to have the firearm with the red circle around it and a line drawn through it, and it's got to say concealed weapons not allowed. Right. So yes, in our gun laws in South Carolina, private businesses can people from carrying firearms into their businesses. In Walmart here in South Carolina, they have a little tiny blurb on a window or a placard or a little plastic sign as you walk through the door. You can't even see it unless you use a magnifying glass, right? They don't have a legal prohibitive sign telling you that you cannot carry in Walmart. There is a little blurb, and so if you're walking like I think Walmart and Sam's Club, Sam's Club, if you're a member of Sam's Club and you sign a user agreement, that user agreement says you are not to carry a firearm into their store, period. And if you get caught by management carrying a firearm, they can terminate your user agreement to go into Sam's Club. Walmart, that's just open to the public. Anybody can go into Walmart, right? But yes, public businesses, private businesses in South Carolina, and I'm sure other businesses all across the nation, feel the same way or have that protection in their gun laws.
There's a lot of work to be done because the perception is, if you were to ask the question of people who patronize Walmart, do you feel safer or not? There's a lot of commonsensical things that we could be doing in this country, like getting former law enforcement, former military to volunteer to be in schools,
Absolutely. I've always said that.
As a safety officer, but you're going to have to get through an army of lawyers to try to make that work. I mean,
that's a hot topic with me because my wife's a teacher, and I've always said, you got me on a tangent now. I've always said that our schools are our most precious resource. These are future doctors, attorneys, lawyers, journeymen. These are our future leaders. They're the most precious resource in America.
Yeah.
It doesn't even be America, it can be anywhere. Your children are your most precious resource, and we do not want to spend the money that is necessary to protect them. Now, as school shootings have become more and more prevalent in America, now where my wife works, there's a resource officer that's there when the school's open. He's there. He's armed. He's in uniform. He's got a patrol car. Blah blah blah. And lots of school districts in America have gone that route. But there are still schools in America where their board of directors or their school districts or whoever's running the show, they don't want to spend a dime on protection. None. And I'm like, That's just a travesty.
America leads the world in school shootings. We have for decades.
My God.
We got to be the leader.
That's crazy.
What about,
And you know why? Because it's a soft target. Crazy people with guns, they know that they can walk into a school or a shopping mall and just start killing people willy-nilly because it's a soft target. You don't see those idiots going into a police station, do you? No, because they know that they're going to meet resistance. They're going to get ended.
There was a young woman who shot up a school in Nashville about a year and a half ago, and they completely buried as far as her manifesto and things like that is concerned. She killed a couple of students and a couple of teachers and whatnot. And, there's the whole, if you don't fit the narrative, you're not going to get, the press isn't going to push as far as what what their motivations were. But what was the name of that USCCA?
Yeah, United States Concealed Carry Association, USCCA.
I'm going to have to look that up because now that I live in East Tennessee, there's a lot of traveling I want to do. There's a lot of Civil War battlefields I want to go see. I have never been to Charleston, and yours is a beautiful state, sir. So I've been told.
Charleston's a terrorist trap. I almost said terrorist trap. No, I'm sorry, Charlestonians. I didn't mean that. That was a Freudian slip. I wanted to say it's a tourist trap, not a terrorist trap, but a tourist trap.
Yeah.
And Charleston has a lot of it's rich in history. Obviously, you can look it up online. Civil War was a lot of famous battles were fought here and lost here and blah blah blah. But yeah, it is the historic part of downtown Charleston is very beautiful. And we got Patriots Point where they have a decommissioned warship. I forget what it's called. I don't know if it's an actual aircraft carrier or not. I think it might be an older aircraft carrier. And I have never even been there. I've lived here for over 20 years, and I've never been to Patriots Point or toured the aircraft carrier. We need to do that between now and the time that we kick off this rock, I guess. But yeah, it's a beautiful state. It has some very beautiful areas.
Do you ever listen to audiobooks? Do you prefer that, or do you like the print?
I have a library. I have multiple bookcases with hardcover books. I really prefer hardcover. I do have a Kindle account, and I have Goodreads, and I can, I've got an iPad that I can read books on it if I want to. But I'm old fashioned, right? I'm a baby boomer, and I just prefer a book in my hands. I like turning pages.
If you peruse Scoundrels in Iraq and Engineers' Adventures, I'm going to give you a one over the world as far as what happened in Iraq and why, but from a goofball's perspective. When I saw that movie Stripes with Bill Murray and John Candy, I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and it came true, strangely. But I'd like to send it to you.
Okay, I'll read it. I love to read. I've read hundreds and thousands of books in my life.
Really?
Yep. My wife and I both. I tell people in high school when everybody else was out at Lake Tawakoni getting drunk and taking drugs and carrying on and doing stupid stuff, my parents, they had me under the thumb. They didn't let us do shit like that, which I'm thankful for. But my mother used to take us to the Greenville County Library, and I would check out 20 books. My mother would check out 20 books, and my sister would check out 20 books. And you could keep the books for 14 days. Well, my mother and I, within 7 or 8 days, would read our 20 books, and we'd swap books. So every 2 weeks, I'd read 40 books. Now, my sister was a slow reader, so she didn't. I think a lot of times she didn't even get through her books, So for 4 years, every summer I read, 40 books every 2 weeks. So that was 40 times.
That's crazy.
160 books every summer. 160 books times 4 years is what? 4 times 160 is I don't know what. I can't do math in my head because I suck at math.
640.
But, yeah, that was during the summers during high school. That's what we did. That was our entertainment. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have cable TV. We didn't have movies. I either read a book or I went outside and played basketball on the basketball hoop that my dad put up with a railroad tie that he buried in the ground with a hoop, played basketball, or I worked in our family garden, which I hated, or I rode my bicycle. And that was my entertainment as a child, as a teenager, preteen, right? But yeah, I love books. I read books all the time. And I'd love to read your book.
Yeah, you'll get a kick at it. I did some pretty silly things. You'll have to get back to me and follow up as far as did that really happen type of thing. Because like
okay.
I said, I am ethically challenged. A lot of things happen when you're downrange that are a little bit. We didn't. I was dealing with Iraqi mostly Arab contractors. And so you don't have to teach those people anything about how to negotiate. I think they invented it.
Is that right? I just put my address in the chat window.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ken, I wasn't able to answer any or ask any of your questions on your PodMeds profile, but you know what? This kind of turned into a longer podcast episode than normal, but it was free flowing, and I think we had a great conversation. But I think at this point, I'm probably going to need to bring it to an end. Now, I might even have to split this up into 2 episodes, which I probably will do. We're at an hour and 14 minutes, and I've had a blast. I've really enjoyed the back and forth.
I'm glad I could pick your brain as far as the current state of affairs are concerned, and it motivates me to check out what's going on with the Tennessee laws, because, I might be fat, dumb, and happy here in East Tennessee in my in my forever home, not expecting anything to happen, but I like to travel though too. And what happens if I want to go to Memphis? What happens then? Or New York City?
Well, you're not going to carry a gun to New York City. I can tell you that right now. You carry a gun to New York City, you better hope you don't get caught with it. But I always tell people that the most important tool in our toolbox when it comes to self-defense is this gray matter between your ears. That's your brain and your mind is the most important self-defense tool that you have. And we have other tools, right? And it's like the analogy is that why do we have fire extinguishers in our homes? Well, God forbid the house catches on fire. And my wife, I always tell fun-lovingly, we've been married 35 years, and she's gotten a lot better at her cooking. But I used to say, I always know when the food's done because the fire alarm goes off, the smoke detector. Ding, the pizza's done, right? She hasn't set one off in the last 6 weeks or so. But we have a fire extinguisher in case, God forbid, a fire breaks out in our house. We don't want the damn thing to burn to the ground. We want to we want to catch it as soon as possible. And if we can put it out with a fire extinguisher, we don't have to call 911. If it gets to the point where the fire extinguisher ain't going to work, then guess what? You got to call 911, grab the family, and get out and let the professionals hopefully come save your house. But a firearm's no different than that. It's a tool. It's in our tool chest that we use for self-defense, for protecting ourselves in case of an emergency. And the only way in South Carolina you can use deadly force is if you're in fear of serious bodily injury and or death, right? That's the only legal requirement for using self-defense or using deadly force. If you use deadly force and you can't prove to a grand jury that you were in fear of serious bodily injury and or death, they're going to prosecute you, right? So you better make damn sure that you understand what the laws of self-defense are in the state that you're in.
Right.
And do your dead level best. Like I practice avoidance. I carry concealed 70 or 80% of the time when I work in unarmed security jobs. I can't even have a gun in the car, right? When I'm on duty. But I would say 70 or 80% of the time. Like my wife and I went to a Facebook meetup today with a bunch of old ladies. I was carrying. I got a We the People belly band holster with a spare magazine and a 9mm. I've lost a lot of weight, so all my big shirts are great concealment garments, right? Unless you knew what you were looking for, you couldn't tell I had a firearm on me. But even going to lunch, in Somerville, South Carolina, I put it on. I take it with me because it's better in my mind, and a lot of people will tell you this. It's my mind. It's better to have it and not need it versus to need it desperately and not have it, because then that's a oh shit moment, right?
Yeah,
so.
Sometimes those platitudes are absolutely correct, and you got to practice too. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
An old hand like myself, I think what I need to do is get to a self-defense class, and then I'll ask the people there, what are the laws in the state of Tennessee? Because
they should be able to tell you.
And if you've never operated a fire extinguisher before, that's a good thing to practice on too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does your wife know how to use one? Has she used one?
Of course not. No. I think we have one under the kitchen sink. I got to look and make sure that we still have one. I don't even know if we still have it.
Take her out.
I don't even know if the thing works.
Take her out to the backyard, give her some iPro, pull that pin, and have to it.
There you go. That's a good idea. Yeah, and it's the same thing with firearms and self-defense. You don't want to wait for that oh shit moment at 3 o'clock in the morning when somebody's kicking your door in to know what you're going to do, right? It's like in your mind, you need to prepare mentally for what you are planning on doing it, because that's not the moment to decide, because you're going to stand there in denial. We're talking about the OODA loop and all of that, you have to mentally prepare yourself.
In the Army, we refer to it as muscle memory.
Right. Right.
You're not even thinking about what you should be doing. You've cleared the weapon. You've loaded the weapon. You know how to operate it safely. You know how it feels in your hand. You know, okay, that's a 15-meter target. You know, because you're going to be shaking like a leaf on a tree. You know, so you got to
Right.
practice too.
Absolutely. All right, Ken. So thank you for being here today. I've had a
My
wonderful
pleasure.
time talking, and I think we had a great, a really nice back and forth, and I had a lot of fun talking to you about all sorts of stuff. And so I'm going to say to the listening audience, thank you for the privilege of your time. If you want to contact me, you can get a hold of me at Liberty Gun Rights Podcast at proton.me. That's Liberty Gun Rights Podcast at proton.me. I try to release a new podcast episode, both audio and video, every Friday morning at 8 a.m. I release the video podcast to my YouTube channel and to rumble.com, which is a conservative version of YouTube. And then all my other podcast episodes go out to Captivate FM, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, Public Radio, Spotify, yada, yada, yada. Wherever you get your podcast, you can catch it. All right? So everybody have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening. Leave me a review. Get on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leave a review. Let us know what you think.